I think one of the reasons why bubble tea, the behavioural economics of bubble tea, is its variable reinforcement theory in a cup.
Right,
Which is, it's a bit like the chocolate at the bottom of the Cornetto, which actually I think is there to prevent leakage. But it's like the final little unexpected treat it's the Easter egg at the end. Okay. And we seem to like certain foods that are kind of slightly uneven. Okay, so I'll go back to the
uneven in
experiment.
Terms of texture.
So there was an experiment with pigeons where they basically trained pigeons, so if they pecked a switch, they got a couple of pellets of food.
Yeah.
And the pigeons would basically peck the switch, have a couple of pellets of food, peck it again, have another couple of pellets of food, and after about 3 pecks, they get a bit sated and a bit bored, and they wander off to do some other pigeon stuff, whatever they do.
Other pigeon stuff.
Shitting on people or whatever it is, okay? And then there was a weird glitch in the experiment where they kind of ran out of food pellets. And so they made the thing a bit random, where when the pigeons pecked a thing, they couldn't afford to give them 2 pellets every time. Sometimes the pigeons would get no pellets, sometimes they get 1, sometimes they get 2. And at that point, the pellets was like a bloody pigeon fruit machine. They became completely addicted to this because the return was no longer constant and predictable, it was uncertain.
The pigeons got addicted.
The pigeons basically just pecked and pecked and pecked and pecked, and you'd basically created pigeon Vegas for these bloody things. Yeah. And they were just going and pecking away. And there seems to be some component in variable reinforcement theory which may explain the appeal of bubble tea, which is that it's different. It keeps changing all the way down. Sometimes you get one of these big lumps of tapioca shooting up.
The texture of it.
Well, it's just that no two sips are completely alike.
I interviewed Margot Henderson, who's Fergus Henderson's wife, who obviously did St. John. And we were talking...
Would you believe it was my local? We were actually in St. John Street as an agency.
Oh, really?
Back in the mid-90s. And my God, I was grateful to that place.
So a couple of things. So she talks about the art of drinking a Negroni and why Negroni is so good. So it's like you're quite stressed. The first sip of a Negroni is actually super strong and punches you. And you get the thing of the lemon, the orange or the lemon. So that really hits you. And then you have 2 of those. And actually... as you get slightly more drunk from the big hits, by the time you get to the end of the Negroni, the ice cubes have begun to melt, so it's actually a much softer drink. So what we were saying is it sort of dances with your mood.
Well, I mean, when I drink a gin and tonic, I like to have the tonic bottle so I can vary the strength as I go through.
Yeah.
I like to start with something, basically you start with something which is, a bit of a depth charge, and then you end up with something that's a soft drink.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that may explain why actually if you make a really good Bloody Mary, you shouldn't mix it perfectly. Conceivably. In other words, the Tabasco should be slightly unevenly distributed. I don't know. What do you think? Okay. Now, this is a bit weird because one of the things I say, one of the things I say, which is that the opposite of a good idea can be another good idea.
Yeah.
Right? The interesting thing with food is there's McDonald's food where the success is that it's completely predictable. There are no surprises. In other words, there's nothing there to make you uneasy. Okay? And then there's another kind of food which is, it's never the same twice. And weirdly, depending on whatever mental frame of perception it may be, sometimes we seem to want one and sometimes we seem to want the other. And you might argue there's a theory about the brain that most of what we perceive is actually a prediction, and we only really turn our senses up into gear when something surprises us. So this is a really interesting philosophical question. Don't ask me, ask a guy called, say, Charles Spence at Oxford, who does a huge amount of research into this. So he will do wonderful, wonderful experiments. Anybody in the food industry, get this guy in and pay him a lot of money because he's fantastic.
What does he do? Sorry.
He will make a strawberry-flavoured sorbet, make it yellow, and put it inside a frozen lemon. So your brain is entirely expecting the thing to be citric and bitter, and instead it's sweet. And the interplay between expectation and delivery basically creates a new taste that doesn't really exist in the natural world. It creates essentially a brain stimulus around taste. The contrast between what you're expecting and what you get generates something on what you might call a third dimension of taste.
Have you heard about Steven Pinker's strawberry cheesecake principle?
Hit me. I know.
I got fucking obsessed with why illustration works so well with food. Not sometimes. Well, obviously, all these products around us, there's illustration.
Yep.
And in lots of these sort of hipster pizza restaurants now, they on their box they'll use illustration. And everywhere I looked, Noble Rot, the wine bar, uses illustration.
A bit of that may simply be it's that you're effectively tapping into heuristic assumptions that have been established by other artisan brands which use illustration. So illustration and hand drawing kind of says handmade a little bit. I mean, Charlie Bigham's genius, I think, was putting the thing in a bamboo thing rather than a plastic pot. Okay? Yeah. Fundamentally, that completely changed our perception of what that food might be and what it might deliver. Okay? And it made us feel that it was kind of handmade because the container didn't say factory.
Yeah.
Right? And indeed, the packaging didn't say it's designed on an Apple Mac. It suggests it was designed by hand. But what often happens then is that this then creates a consumer assumption that food that's packaged like that is that kind of food. And people who therefore, an example would be you're having guests round, okay? You'd probably rather serve them hand-illustrated crisps, okay? Or crisps that have a kind of artisanal quality, rather than crisps that look like they're produced by a multinational.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped Islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.